How did this one organization manage to achieve such near total dominance across so many different huge markets? Search, mobile, browsers, email, video, the list goes on. And maybe more importantly, what price is actually paid by the user? When you realize that you might be the product being monetized.
That's it. That's the ultimate paradox of this internet age, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's unpack exactly how this machine was built. Let's start right at the beginning.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack it with the essential founding story. We have to go back to Stanford University, January 1996. This whole thing started as a research project. Just two PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And our sources remind us the initial name wasn't glamorous at all. It was temporarily called Backrub.
Backrub. Yeah, it sounds funny now, but it was actually a very literal name because the core function of their project was checking backlinks. The links pointing back to a web page from other pages.
Okay.
And this simple concept, though, it led directly to the key innovation that really made Google PageRank.
PageRank. Yeah, that really seems like the foundational genius here. Because before Google, most search engines, they were pretty crude, right? They just looked at how many times your search term popped up on a page.
Exactly. Keyword stuffing.
Which led to a terrible user experience, yeah.
Right.
Sites could just game the system. So what did PageRank do that was so different?
It was revolutionary at the time because it introduced a kind of qualitative judgment, not just counting things. PageRank scored a website's relevance, not just based on the number of other sites linking to it, but crucially on the importance or the authority of those pages doing the linking.
Okay.
Think of it like citations in academic papers, A reference from a major respected journal carries way more weight than one from some obscure blog.
Right.
PageRank did that for the web, and it immediately delivered vastly better search results.
That makes total sense. It's intuitive. So they quickly figured out this potential was way bigger than just a university research project. They ditched Backrub, thankfully, and moved to something much grander, Google, which, as many know, was a deliberate misspelling of Google, the number 1 followed by 100 zeros.
Pure Silicon Valley ambition right there.
Totally. Signifying their huge goal. Organize and provide access to just massive, massive quantities of information.
And the transition from that idea to an actual corporation, it happened incredibly fast. August 1998, they get their first major vote of confidence. It's a $100,000 angel investment check from Andy Bechtolsheim, who co-founded Sun Microsystems.
Right, and that check was famously written before they even formally incorporated.
Exactly. It basically forced them to officially create the company, Google Inc.
And the classic Silicon Valley startup myth holds true here, doesn't it? In 1998, their first office was literally a friend's garage. Susan and Wojcicki's garage, who later became CEO of YouTube, of course.
That's right. They eventually pulled together about $1 million in initial funding. Some other key early investors were Jeff Bezos from Amazon and the entrepreneur Ram Shriram.
Wow, Bezos was in early.
Yeah. And the very first employee, another PhD student from Stanford, Craig Silverstein, hired right there in the garage.
Incredible. But once the serious venture capital firms got involved, specifically Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital, they apparently insisted that the young founders, Page and Brin, needed some experienced corporate leadership.
Yeah, that's a common story. They brought in Eric Schmidt as CEO in 2001, and Schmidt was really instrumental. He helped scale the company, taking it from this ambitious, slightly chaotic startup into a much more stable enterprise ready for, public life.
And that stable enterprise needed space. They kept outgrowing places, right? Before finally moving into the now iconic Googleplex in Mountain View, California, back in 2003.
They leased it at first from Silicon Graphics, but then they bought the whole massive complex outright in 2006 for, I think it was $319 million.
Wow. And then came the really definitive moment of market validation, the IPO, the initial public offering. August 19th, 2004.
Huge day. Shares were offered at $85 each, and right away, Google hit a market capitalization of over $23 billion.
It's just staggering. It's such a powerful validation of their tech and, the market seeing that potential. And the final step, maybe, in their saturation to culture came in 2006. The verb to Google was officially added to both Merriam-Webster and the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yeah, although, as our sources point out, the first time it kind of hit pop culture on TV was actually a bit earlier. A 2002 episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, apparently.
Buffy! Okay, that's a great trivia bit.
It really just highlights how incredibly quickly their technology went from being a tool to being a universal concept, a verb.
It really does, and that sets the stage perfectly for where we need to go next. We have to follow the money, right? Because that massive influx of cash from the IPO, it was immediately put to work building this seemingly unassailable financial empire.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the engine room, the advertising, the sheer market dominance, and the frankly ruthless and brilliant acquisition strategy that really cemented their position today.
Yeah, the foundational reality of Google's parent company, Alphabet, it's actually pretty simple when you boil it down. They are an advertising company. They just happen to offer some incredibly useful technology alongside it.
Right.
Our sources show that nearly 75% of Alphabet's total revenue comes from ad sales. For 2024, that's a staggering figure, $264 billion just from ads.
$264 billion.
And this success isn't just about, selling banner ads. It's about controlling the actual infrastructure of global online commerce.
So how do they actually manage that kind of volume? It seems like a really complex system. You've got Google Ads, AdMob for mobile, AdSense for publishers, and maybe the single most important piece for their ad dominance. DoubleClick Ad Exchange, which they bought back in 2008 for, $3.1 billion.
That's one, $3.1 billion. And DoubleClick is just crucial. It's like the essential glue holding the whole display advertising ecosystem together.
Okay, explain that. What does it actually do?
Think of it as the ultimate middleman, the auction house. It allows publishers, say, a news website with space to sell, and advertisers who want to buy that space to connect and make a transaction, all in real time, often within milliseconds.
Right, the real-time bidding.
Exactly. And by owning DoubleClick, Google essentially controls the marketplace from both ends. They're helping the sellers sell and the buyers buy, which guarantees them a cut of pretty much every digital ad transaction happening through that system.
That level of control is just breathtaking. And that control translates directly into profit from the most basic online interaction. The click. I saw a stat from 2017, for instance. Nearly half the company's profit, 46%, came purely from clicks, cost per click.
Yeah, but here's where the immediate conflict, or at least controversy, pops up. Sources documented issues going way back, as early as 2006, suggesting that a significant chunk of those clicks, somewhere between 14% and 20%, were considered fraudulent or invalid.
Wait, hold on. 14 to 20%. That sounds massive. How does a public company maintain revenue integrity and keep billing advertisers for clicks if potentially a fifth of the product is dubious? Was this ever really resolved?
Well, that's the sort of perpetual tension within the whole ad tech world, isn't it? Google has certainly invested heavily in detecting click fraud over the years. They have teams dedicated to it.
Sure.
But the sources indicate the issue remains pretty pervasive across the digital ecosystem. And because Google controls the mechanisms, the ad exchange, the analytics, the data, they end up being the ultimate arbiters of what counts as a valid click.
So they're grading their own homework, essentially.
In a way, yes. And their continued dominance means that advertisers, even with those risks, they still have to use Google's platform because that's simply where the audience is. You can't afford not to be there.
Which brings us right to those market share stats. They really do illustrate the scale we're talking about. It's one thing to dominate search, which they clearly do, but they dominate practically every gateway we use to access the internet.
The numbers are honestly reflective of near monopoly status across several completely distinct markets. It's not just one thing.
Right.
Search. Globally, they're hovering around 90% market share, just incredible dominance.
90%.
Mobile operating systems. Android controls over 71% of the global market. Think about that, nearly 3/4 of smartphones.
Okay.
The web browser, you're probably used to find this. Chrome has around 67.9% market share worldwide. Apple Safari is a very distant second at about 16%.
Wow. So even if someone makes a conscious choice, okay, I'm not using Google search, I'll use DuckDuckGo or something, they're still highly likely operating on an Android phone, maybe using the Chrome browser anyway, probably managing their email through Gmail, which has, over 1.8 billion users?
That's right. Or they're navigating using Google Maps, which has 2 billion monthly users. And then if they decide to watch a video, they're almost certainly landing on YouTube, the second most visited website globally, which, again, Google owns.
It truly is a comprehensive ecosystem. You're inside it almost no matter what you do online.
And this ecosystem wasn't just built organically. It was strategically purchased and then integrated. The YouTube acquisition back in 2006 for $1.65 billion in stock, that was absolutely foundational for their video dominance.
Yeah, hard to imagine the internet without YouTube now.
For sure. A more controversial acquisition, though, was Motorola Mobility in 2012. That cost them $12.5 billion.
$12.5 billion. And they later sold off most of the hardware part of Motorola, didn't they? That seems like a huge price tag just for phones they didn't ultimately want to make themselves. What was the real play there?
Yeah, the phones themselves weren't the main prize. The real goal was the intellectual property. Motorola owned this huge, crucial portfolio of patents related to mobile technology.
Ah, patents.
Exactly. This portfolio was seen as necessary, vital really, to defend Android against all the patent lawsuits that were flying around at the time, particularly from competitors like Apple and Microsoft.
Right, the smartphone patent war.
Precisely. They were arguing that Android infringed on their proprietary technologies. So the Motorola acquisition was essentially a very expensive form of legal defense, designed to secure the future of Android and its dominance in the mobile OS market.
That really illustrates how central market defense is to their strategy, not just offense. And they also kept absorbing specialized competitors to integrate features, right? Like Waze.
Yeah, Waze in 2013, they paid $966 million for it. And almost immediately, they started integrating Waze's crowdsourced real-time traffic data and reporting features directly into Google Maps, made maps much better, much faster. And that same strategic thinking, integrating services and extending their reach, it extended into hardware too, pushing their services into the physical consumer world, which of course also extends their data collection footprint.
Right. So we see the Pixel phones develop, replacing the old Nexus line.
Yep, in 2016.
The Chromebook laptops, the Chromecast streaming dongle, and the whole suite of Nest smart home devices, speakers, cameras, Wi-Fi routers.
All of it. All serving as more access points, more sensors, feeding data back into that central advertising and data engine.
Okay, so we've kind of established the foundation here. Ubiquitous data collection that started with PageRank's insights, scaled massively through aggressive strategic acquisitions like YouTube, DoubleClick, Motorola, and monetized overwhelmingly through advertising. But this entire structure, this whole successful model, it recently faced a major internal shakeup, didn't it? Because of the sudden rise of generative AI.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge moment. Despite Google having DeepMind, which is, arguably the world leader in fundamental AI research for years, they faced a sudden, almost existential challenge when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene in late 2022.
Right. ChatGPT captured the public imagination so quickly.
It really did. And it led to Google's senior management declaring an internal code red.
A code red? That sounds like serious panic. What did that directive actually mandate inside Google?
It demanded an immediate, massive pivot. The order went out, all major products, and they defined that as products with over 1 billion users had to incorporate generative AI functionalities.
Right.
They had to do it within months.
Wow, just months.
Yeah, it was this forced acceleration. They had to get AI out of the research labs and into the hands of actual users, like yesterday, to show the world and maybe themselves that Google wasn't going to be left behind in this next wave of tech.
And this rapid sprint, this pivot, was made possible, at least in part, by that earlier strategic buy, right? DeepMind, acquired back in 2014. The team famous for things like AlphaGo beating the world's best Go players.
Yeah, DeepMinds became central. So what consumer-facing products actually came out of this code red scramble?
Well, we saw the quick launch of Bard, which they've now rebranded as Gemini, in March 2023. That's their direct conversational AI, the competitor to ChatGPT.
Right.
But their AI portfolio is way broader now, and it's expanding incredibly fast. It's not just chatbots. We're seeing specialized models like Imagen for really high-quality text-to-image generation, by VO, which does text to video, and even these highly targeted tools like LearnLM, which is designed to be like a personal AI tutor, a learning guide.
Yeah, and I think maybe the most telling example of their intent, how they want to reshape information flow, is NotebookLM.
Explain that one.
It's basically a tool for synthesizing and summarizing your own documents, your research notes, that kind of thing. But the really interesting part, it includes an audio overview feature. It can generate a podcast-like summary of your own documents.
Oh, wow. So they're directly targeting how we consume information, even personal information.
Seems like it. And as they make this huge pivot into this high-stakes, incredibly data-intensive AI future, they clearly recognize that enterprise security is absolutely paramount. You can't mess that up.
Right.
Which brings us to Google's biggest acquisition ever. The agreement to acquire the cloud cybersecurity startup Wiz, announced in March 2025. The price tag. $32 billion in cash.
$32 billion for a cybersecurity company. That is just an astronomical sum. Why is securing cloud customers, particularly AI development, worth more than YouTube or even Motorola Mobility costs them?
Well, because the potential future revenue stream from cloud, especially AI-driven cloud services, is potentially that massive.
Yeah.
And trust is completely non-negotiable there, especially when you're dealing with large enterprises, governments.
Okay.
The stated goal for buying Wiz is specifically to help AI companies meet complex security and compliance needs, especially if they're using multiple cloud platforms. So this acquisition fundamentally strengthens Google Cloud's position against its big rivals, Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure,
How so?
by offering top-tier integrated security right within their platform. It makes Google Cloud look like the safer, more trusted environment for these really high-value, highly sensitive AI development projects. It's a strategic moat.
And this AI push, it isn't just commercial, is it? It's deeply geopolitical now. They seem to be explicitly tying their AI development into global government strategies.
Precisely. You see it clearly in November 2024, when Google announced this massive new AI hub in Saudi Arabia. It's specifically designed to support the kingdom's Vision 2030 initiative.
Vision 2030, right.
This partnership, they project, could contribute up to $71 billion to the Saudi economy. And there's a sharp focus on localizing AI, enhancing Arabic language capabilities. It's a huge strategic investment in the Middle East.
And it's not just economic development. On the military side, we saw in July 2025, the U.S. Department of Defense awarded Google a $200 million contract for AI integration in military applications.
Yeah, putting them right alongside rivals like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Elon Musk's xAI. It confirms that Google's AI technology, their models, are now considered central to national security strategy, alongside their role in global economic plans.
So this immense concentration of power, technological, financial, geopolitical, it naturally invites scrutiny, right? Massive, continuous scrutiny.
Absolutely. For years now, Google has been locked in these perpetual legal and regulatory battles with governments all over the world. It's just the global consequence of achieving such monopoly-like dominance.
And the loudest, maybe the most consistent voice pushing back has definitely been the European Union. They've repeatedly hit Google with massive, multi-billion euro fines for anti-competitive behavior.
Yeah, the EU approach is just fundamentally different from the US. They tend to intervene faster, more aggressively. The first really big fine landed in 2017, $2.42 billion. That was for abusing its search dominance to favor its own Google shopping comparison service in the search results.
Right, the self-preferencing issue, using their power in one market to boost another.
Exactly. But that fine was actually dwarfed the very next year, 2018. A colossal 4.34 billion fine related to Android devices.
4.3 billion euros. Explain the mechanism there. What exactly was Google doing with Android that the EU found illegal?
This fine was about tying and bundling. Basically, Google was forcing phone manufacturers, the Samsungs, the LGs of the world, to pre-install the Google Search app and the Chrome web browser if they wanted access to the essential Google Play Store and other key Google mobile services.
So you couldn't have the App Store without taking Search in Chrome, too?
Pretty much. The EU argued this illegally cemented Google's dominance in both search and the browser market, effectively shutting out potential competitors before they even had a chance.
And Google fought that one hard, but they lost the appeal in 2022, right?
They did. The EU's legal system seems pretty relentless on this. Just in 2024, the EU Court of Justice upheld that original $2.4 billion fine related to the shopping comparison service, finally concluding a case that had actually started way back in 2009.
Wow, 15 years.
Yeah, and the fines just kept coming. More recently, in 2025, the European Commission hit Google with another $2.95 billion fine.
What was this one for?
This time, it was about their advertising infrastructure again. Specifically, abusing its dominance by giving preferential treatment to its own ad exchange within its publisher ad server system.
So, rigging the ad auction house they controlled.
Essentially, yes. Controlling search wasn't enough. They were also accused of tilting the scales in the massive online advertising market they facilitate.
Okay, so if the EU mainly focused on these huge financial penalties, the U.S. antitrust battle, spearheaded by the Department of Justice, seemed to strike more at the fundamental structure of the search empire itself. The DOJ filed its big antitrust suit in October 2020.
Yeah, and that lawsuit led to a really monumental finding in August 2024. D.C. Circuit Court Judge Emmett Mehta ruled that Google did, in fact, hold an illegal monopoly over both online search and search advertising, violating the foundational Sherman Antitrust Act.
So the court confirmed the government's core claim. Google illegally maintained its monopoly.
That's right. The finding itself was huge.
And the remedies the DOJ proposed after that ruling in November 2024, they were absolutely stunning. They were talking about forcing Google to sell off Chrome, its browser, requiring them to share key search data with competitors, banning them from even re-entering the browser market for 5 years, and crucially, ending those incredibly lucrative exclusive default search deals.
Those exclusive deals were really at the heart of the government's argument about how Google maintained the monopoly. The most famous example, the one everyone talks about, is the payment Google makes to Apple. Reportedly $22 billion in 2022 alone.
$22 billion, just so Google is the default search engine in Apple's Safari browser.
Exactly. It just demonstrates the astronomical sums Google is willing to pay simply to prevent any competitor from gaining even a tiny foothold. They literally pay their biggest rivals billions to keep them out of the search market on those platforms.
It's incredible. But the final ruling from Judge Mehta in September 2025, it was complex, wasn't it? While he confirmed the monopoly violation, he ultimately decided not to force Google to divest its core products. No forced sale of Chrome or Android.
That's right. It wasn't the full breakup the DOJ had pushed for.
So what was the critical compromise or the key outcome of that ruling then?
The compromise seemed to be targeting the practices used to maintain the monopoly, rather than the structure itself. So Google is now legally barred from entering into those huge exclusive default search contracts like the multi-billion-dollar one with Apple. That's gone.
Okay, that's significant.
And furthermore, they're now required to share certain search data with rivals, which theoretically should help level the playing field a bit. So the company avoided being broken up, but the primary mechanism they allegedly used to maintain dominance for nearly 2 decades is now illegal in the U.S.
Interesting. So beyond these massive antitrust battles, Google has faced a whole host of other corporate controversies too. Things centered on ethics, tax strategies, its internal labor culture. Let's touch on the tax structure first.
Yeah, tax avoidance, or perhaps tax minimization, has been a consistent theme for years. Google famously utilized complex international structures like the double Irish.
The double Irish. Can you break that down simply? How did shuffling money between countries save them so much tax?
Well, basically, it exploited legal loopholes in international tax law at the time. Income generated in high-tax countries like the U.S. or France or Germany would be legally paid as royalties for intellectual property to a subsidiary based in Ireland, which had lower tax rates.
Oh.
That Irish subsidiary might then pay fees to another shell subsidiary, often in the Netherlands, that's the Dutch sandwich part sometimes mentioned, which then allowed the profits to be finally routed to another Irish registered subsidiary that was actually tax resident in a zero-tax jurisdiction, like Bermuda. Right, so they could legally declare billions in profits in Bermuda, which had no corporate income tax. The result: between 2007 and 2010 alone, sources estimate they saved around $3.1 billion in taxes this way. And in just 1 year, 2017, they reportedly funneled nearly $22.7 billion to Bermuda using variations of these techniques.
That is just a staggering amount of money shifted offshore. Now, they claim they overhauled this structure around 2020 after immense public and governmental pressure, right?
They did announce changes, yes, largely due to international efforts to close those loopholes. But the history highlights the sophisticated lengths multinational corporations can go to minimize their tax burden.
Meanwhile, internally, the culture at Google hasn't always been smooth sailing either, has it? Particularly around ethical debates and worker representation.
No, definitely not. The internal clash over Project Dragonfly is a really potent example. This was Google's proposed project to build a censored search engine specifically for the Chinese market.
Right, I remember the outcry over that.
Huge internal backlash, employee walkouts, petitions, widespread external protests as well. It ultimately forced the company to publicly cancel the project in 2019. But it really highlighted this deep tension between leadership's perceived commercial ambitions and the ethical red lines held by many of its employees.
And those kinds of workplace issues, the disagreements over company direction and treatment, they eventually coalesce into the formation of the Alphabet Workers Union in 2021, right?
That's right. A minority union, but significant nonetheless. And court documents later revealed just how aggressively the company had worked against unionization efforts before that.
How so?
Well, documents surfaced detailing a sophisticated anti-union campaign run by Google between 2018 and 2020, codenamed Project Vivian. And the stated internal goal of this campaign was, quite bluntly, designed to convince them, employees, that unions suck.
Wow, convince them unions suck. That's pretty direct.
It revealed a sustained strategic effort from management to undermine labor organization within the company. And adding to workforce controversies, there was a notable stir in February 2025 when Google quietly removed its prominent public commitment to making diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI part of everything we do from its annual investor report.
They dropped that phrasing. Why?
The company did give a specific reason, but it was interpreted by many observers as signaling a potential shift in corporate priorities, possibly moving away from explicit DEI targets amidst broader political pressures.
Okay, so all of these discussions, the structure, the legal battles, the financial engineering, the internal culture clashes, they all inevitably lead us back to the user, don't they? And back to that central truth we need to grapple with, the privacy paradox. If you're not paying cash for the product, the common wisdom holds that you, the user, are the product.
And that axiom is, well, it's fundamentally true for Google. Their entire massive advertising revenue stream depends completely on their ability to create incredibly effective, hyper-targeted advertising.
Right.
Which is only possible because of their unparalleled ability to collect, synthesize, and categorize vast amounts of user data. Their own privacy disclosure openly lists the extensive categories they gather. Your location, contact info, your search history, obviously, your browsing history across the web, even your purchase history sometimes.
And they collect this data through multiple methods. There are the obvious inputs, the things we actively type into search, the videos we watch on YouTube, the routes we plan on maps.
Yeah.
But then there's the much more pervasive and often completely unnoticed passive collection that's happening constantly in the background.
Absolutely. The oldest method of passive collection is through cookies. Those little bits of data that websites download onto your browser to track your preferences and activity, often following you across the internet.
Right, cookies. And there was a big deal about Google planning to phase out third-party cookies in Chrome for privacy reasons, wasn't there?
There was. They talked about it for years, developing alternatives like the Privacy Sandbox. But here's a critical update. After all that, Google reversed its decision late in 2024. They decided not to kill off third-party cookies in Chrome after all.
They reversed it. Why would they do that if not because dismantling the tracking infrastructure built around those cookies was just too disruptive to their core advertising business?
That's exactly the conclusion many drew. Killing third-party cookies would have significantly shaken up the ad tech industry, an industry Google dominates. But it also would have forced them, and everyone else, to adopt potentially less intrusive tracking methods. By reversing the decision, they essentially maintain the status quo that benefits their existing ad systems.
Okay, so cookies persist,
Right.
but you mentioned even more invasive methods like fingerprinting.
Yeah, fingerprinting is significantly more invasive and persistent than standard cookies.
Explain how it works. How is it harder to stop?
Okay, so instead of just placing a file on your browser, fingerprinting creates a unique ID tied specifically to your device by collecting a whole range of incredibly detailed, subtle data points about the device itself.
Like what kind of data?
Things like your operating system version, the specific list of fonts installed in your system, the precise size of your screen resolution, even tiny variations like the unique speed at which your device's battery drains.
Battery drain speed, seriously?
Yeah. By aggregating dozens of these tiny, seemingly innocuous data points, they can create a highly unique digital fingerprint for your specific device. This fingerprint can identify you persistently, even if you clear your cookies, change your IP address, or use private browsing modes. It's much harder to shake off.
And didn't Google recently change their policies regarding this?
They did. Perhaps most alarmingly for privacy advocates, in February 2025, Google officially updated its policies to explicitly allow this practice of fingerprinting for advertising purposes.
Wow.
Now, the company still maintains its public stance. They insist they only sell access to audiences grouping users into demographic buckets for advertisers via their real-time bidding platforms. They strongly deny selling raw, personally identifiable data.
They claim the data is anonymized before it's used for targeting.
That's the claim. But that claim of true effective anonymity is highly, highly contested by privacy researchers. Numerous studies have shown that it's often almost trivial for sophisticated actors to take supposedly anonymized data sets, like lists of search queries or location points, and re-identify the specific individuals involved by cross-referencing with other data.
So even if they aren't selling a file labeled "Your name here, search history," they're selling incredibly intimate persistent access derived from that history. Access to who you are, what you want, what you fear, based on everything you do online.
That's the core of the criticism, yes. Derived from everything you search, watch, map, browse, and even where your phone happens to be.
And this inherent conflict between their business model and user privacy, it keeps leading to massive legal challenges, huge lawsuits. We saw a landmark example in April 2024, didn't we? Google faced that $5 billion class action lawsuit. It alleged they were tracking users even when they were using Chrome's supposedly private incognito mode.
Yeah, that settlement was really significant. Google didn't admit wrongdoing in the legal sense, but they agreed to destroy billions of data records that had been collected from users while they were in incognito mode.
Destroy the data, that's huge.
It implicitly acknowledged the deceptive nature of tracking users when those users had a reasonable expectation of privacy. It sets a pretty important precedent regarding what private browsing should actually mean.
And the controversy goes beyond browsing history, right? It extends to our physical location data, too. Google faced lawsuits, I think, in D.C. and 3 other states.
That's right. Accusations of deceiving consumers about how and when their location data was being collected, even when users had specifically gone into their settings and turned off location sharing features. The tracking continued anyway in the background through other means.
And this isn't just about creepy, targeted ads following you around the mall. This location data has real constitutional implications, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It became critically controversial when reports emerged that law enforcement, like the FBI, were utilizing geofence warrants. These are warrants demanding that Google turn over anonymized location data for all devices present within a specific geographic area during a certain time frame.
So near a protest site, for example.
Near protests, near crime scenes. The concern is that these warrants can scoop up the location data of potentially thousands of completely innocent citizens who just happen to be nearby, raising serious Fourth Amendment questions about unreasonable searches and mass surveillance facilitated by a commercial entity.
And even their cutting-edge AI models haven't been immune to legal trouble over data use, have they?
No. French regulators fined Google around $270 million in 2024. Why? Specifically for using content scraped from French news outlets to train its AI model, Bard, now Gemini, without proper disclosure or compensation to those publishers.
So feeding the AI copyrighted news content without permission or payment.
That was the finding, yes. Another data usage controversy.
And finally, maybe the most chilling example of the risk involved in centralizing so much critical data and infrastructure in one place. The cloud. That incident in Australia.
Oh, the Unisuper incident. Yeah, that was horrifying. In May 2024, a simple Google Cloud misconfiguration, not a hack, not an external attack, but an internal error accidentally deleted the entire cloud account of Australia's Unisuper pension fund.
The whole account. How much was that?
The fund was worth 135 billion Australian dollars. It affected 500,000 members who temporarily couldn't access their retirement savings information.
Unbelievable. Just deleted by mistake.
It was eventually restored after frantic work, but it served as this stark, terrifying illustration of the severe systemic risk we take when we place critical global financial and other infrastructure into the hands of a single, centralized cloud provider. One mistake can have catastrophic consequences.